Hello. There's a few issues I want to cover tonight. So the first one is this. As I often do, I cite newspaper sources. This is from the London Times. It's an article today. If you can see the title there. Women who lie about rape are criminals too. This is an article by Libby Purvis, and I give her credit for raising this important subject. She's highlighting the case of a young man, really a boy, 17 years old, Jay Cheshire. She doesn't cite when this happened, but apparently he was falsely accused of rape, and the ordeal that he went through resulted in his suicide. 17 years old. Um, and there's been other examples of, if not suicide, then men totally destroyed with false allegations, losing their job, their marriage in some cases, their friends, and their reputation absolutely dragged through the gutter. Um, I'm not going to read that whole article because it is quite lengthy. But she raises a lot of important issues. One of the things she talks about is actually the UK is less forgiving of false accusers than the United States, Australia, or Canada. Well, if that's the case, that's troubling because this country is bad enough. So that suggests to me that the situation in Canada, Australia, and the United States is even worse for men who have been falsely accused. I completely agree with the premise of her article. I think that if you knowingly implicate someone that you know to be innocent, that's absolutely reprehensible. Now, very often mental illness is cited in these cases, but if men can be jailed despite having mental illness for serious crimes, then women should be facing the same consequences, regardless of a mental illness or not. Maybe they require, a secure unit or something, but they should face consequences. I absolutely 100% agree with that principle. Now, to be fair, we have had examples of false accusers that have been sentenced to a custodial sentence, but on too many occasions they've been let off with a community sentence. Um, it's simply not taken as seriously as the crime of rape itself. Um, as I always try to do with contentious subjects, I want to make it absolutely clear. Rape is a real crime, it's a real phenomenon, and probably most women who come forward alleging rape are being sincere because this thing does happen. Um, and I do understand the concerns about excessively focusing on false accusers. The concern is that genuine rape victims get ignored. Um, Now, in many, many areas of legal justice, it can be fairly argued that there is a bias against men. In terms of rape conviction rates, actually, they are quite low. So, female rape victims could argue that the system is stacked against them in that regard. So there is a compelling case for a better level of rape conviction rates because I for one just don't buy this logic that all women are liars. That's a dangerous idea and it's not true at all. But nor should we assume that this doesn't happen, that there aren't women out there who either because of a mental illness, and that's a taboo subject in itself, but sometimes they're motivated by a sick sense of revenge. It could be um, perhaps they felt the man didn't give them attention, or perhaps they didn't like the sort of attention he was giving them, or it's some sort of petty revenge, but with a very heavy price. Um, that has been cited in some cases. And for those sort of women, I say throw the book at them. I say give them a sentence at least as long as what the man would be sentenced to. Um, so I really do think this is an important issue. Um, I see absolutely no reason why someone who's knowingly lied, knowing that it will destroy someone's life, why they shouldn't face a custodial sentence. I really see no reason, because women like that are dangerous. There has been some cases where they've been exposed because they've accused multiple men, and each man, even though the men were strangers, I think this was a case, it may have been Manchester, but don't quote me on that, whereby a woman had accused several men of raping her at different times. Now, what happened was each man gave the same story, the same account, of the way she had approached them, but none of the men knew each other, so this was not a conspiracy where these guys were getting together. It turned out that she was trying to get financial settlements and so on. So it was a typical example of the sort of thing that might happen here. Um, Regarding the mental illness thing, like I say, that is a taboo subject and it's a complex area. But I do think if we're going to hold the standards of dueling men who might be mentally ill, um, and if that isn't used as an alibi for their actions, then it shouldn't be used as an alibi for the actions of false accusers. Um, I do understand the concerns because one of them is, for example, that excessive focus on this takes away attention from real victims. And I wouldn't want a situation where that happens. I wouldn't want a situation where women or men, for that matter, who have been raped, feel that they're not going to be taken seriously or they're going to be treated as a liar. Um, and it's really unfortunate that there are people out there that do this because, unfortunately, it does make life harder for everyone. It makes life harder for the innocent men they accuse, as well as their families, but it also makes life hard for those innocent women who have also faced this terrible crime. Because it gives them less confidence in going forward because they think, will I be believed? Um, so that's another problematic area. Um, I think I've raised this in a previous video, and it would be a controversial thing to say, but I believe in rape cases, maybe the only way to guarantee um, truth is with lie detector tests. Now, I appreciate that would be very controversial because it would be, people would say it's stigmatizing potential victims. But what I would argue is it can be done in a sensitive way. So you could have that while still treating the victim or the alleged victim with compassion, with sensitivity, but simply have it as part of the process. Now, from what I understand, lie detector tests are 98% foolproof. That's not as good as 100%, but they're pretty secure. It may be the only way because if you have a situation where it's her word against his, who do you believe? She could absolutely be telling the truth, and the man is a sadistic rapist who doesn't give a damn, and he's lying to protect his own hide. On the other hand, she could be lying for her teeth to implicate an innocent man, and that man is in a terrible situation where he doesn't know um, how he can defend himself if his claims of being in a different place and so on simply aren't believed. So this is a very, very complex area, I think. But I think what every reasonable person would agree with is that the innocent need to be protected and get justice, and the guilty need to face consequences. In other words, innocent women who have been victims of rape deserve that their rapist faces jail time. Um, An innocent man who have been falsely accused deserves to see their false accuser do jail time. That to me sounds completely reasonable, completely fair, and I don't know how anyone could argue against that. Um, Keeping with this subject, there is the issue of anonymity in rape trials, and again, I probably raise this in another video. Um, Again, there's compelling arguments on both sides. Uh, in the current situation in the UK, men over the age of 18 are named as rape defendants, whether they're guilty or innocent. That's obviously deeply controversial. The um, the victim is not named. No, I don't really have a problem with the victim not being named because I understand the reason for that. But I do have a problem with the defendant being named before he's even being sentenced. If he's been found guilty in a court of law, in a fair trial, that's a different matter. But to be named when you haven't even been sentenced, i.e., you haven't been found guilty or innocent, seems to me to be incredibly reckless. Um, there are those, and when I said I can understand both sides, there is one argument that I do have some sympathy with. That is, in cases of serial rapists, if he's named in the press, then, or if he's described, women who have been previous victims of the same man can come forward because they would think, well, this woman's went through the same thing as me. That I know that guy, he done it to me as well. And there has been examples of serial rapists being caught in such cases, but that I'm still not sure if that really justifies then naming and shaming potentially innocent men, potentially innocent. Not saying they are innocent, but you know, in the end of the day, innocent until proven guilty has to be a hallmark of our justice. And it doesn't matter if he's found innocent. It doesn't matter if he's exonerated in law. His reputation will always, that record will always be in the papers, even if they print a week later, Mr. B was found innocent. That will always hang over him, and there'll always be a question of what if. By contrast, in an anonymous trial, the only people that would know would be the jury, the judge, and those directly involved with the trial, and his family and friends. But for example, employers and so on wouldn't know about it. I don't, I don't think it would haunt him for the rest of his life in the same way. So I personally feel very uneasy about that. I believe in rape trials, everyone should be anonymous until the verdict. That's my instinct. Um, there has been a number of high-profile rape trials, like the Chet Evans case. I'm not going to weigh too much into that because I don't know all the details for a fact, and I cannot say, he was found guilty in a court of law, so we have to accept that as the fact. He was found guilty in a court of law. Nevertheless, I've seen people argue that there was a lot of key evidence that was ignored, and it's worth noting that his girlfriend stood by him and she didn't believe it. So, believe what you want with that, but that's an example. He's a public figure. He was named before he was found guilty, so it's a question of um, what's the right balance here in terms of um, in terms of identifying a serial rapist. I understand that's a grey area because if he's not named, then how do other potential victims come forward? That's where there is a grey area. Because how do you tell a serial rapist from a one-time rapist? How would you actually tell? So there are grey areas here, but I was very saddened and angry when I read that case of this young man who killed himself. And I know it works both ways. I know there's um, women who have taken their own lives as well after suffering from this terrible crime. My heart completely goes out to rape victims. It's an awful crime. Forcing someone to have sex against their will is despicable. Incidentally, I believe in rape cases it has to be a clear case of no, i.e. she resisted. I do feel uneasy with this. In recent years, there's been debate about what defines rape, and I do feel a bit uneasy with the idea that someone could be charged and serve long prison sentence. I'm talking here in adult cases when there hasn't actually been any protest against the act of rape. There has been some who have argued that lots of things can can be considered rape. I think that's difficult because when you start to make such a wide definition of something that is a very serious crime, that becomes problematic because then you get areas that are very grey. Um, I mean, should it be a case that when a man is having intercourse with a woman, he asks every 1 minute, "Do you approve? Do you approve? Do you approve?" Just doesn't sound really workable. Of course, a man should make sure that the woman's comfortable. He should make sure that it's consensual. But for one thing, it kills romance. If you constantly sort of, I think men have responsibility to ensure that the woman they're with is comfortable and that she's giving consent. Um, but I feel uneasy about the prospect that someone could be jailed when there has been no explicit rejection of sex. And I'm talking here in adult cases. Obviously, it's different when we're talking about children because that's exploitation. But in adult cases, I think to define rape, there has to be a clear no. Um, and if it's a case that the woman's frozen with terror or something, well, that needs to be taken into consideration. But it is important to define what this is. People will raise eyebrows at that, but I do believe it's important to define because it's such a serious crime. Justice must be concrete. There cannot be any question marks. So, as as a justice system, we need a very clear notion of what exactly constitutes rape, and we need truth and we need justice. Truth for which party is telling the truth, and justice for the innocent. Um, if you're a woman and you've been a victim of rape, please, please, please don't think that I'm against you. My heart absolutely goes out to you, and I would never assume to understand what that's like. I can't imagine the terror and the mental anguish and all the rest of it. Must be absolutely awful. So, rapists are scum and they absolutely should be jailed, but we must ensure um, innocent until proven guilty. We must absolutely be sure that the alleged victim is reliable. This is necessary for justice.